Thank you very much for being here. Thank you to the audience. Thank you for being here with us via Skype, Francesco. Tonight we will speak a little bit, I think, about digitization of museums and the exhibitions of the future. Let me introduce you briefly first. You are Artistic Director at Tate Liverpool since April 2012. Sorry, I will do it like that so you see me better. And you're part of the curatorial team of the 2016 Liverpool Biennial. In 2013, you were a member of the international jury for the 55th exhibition at La Biennale di Venezia. From 2010 to 2012, you were director of Artissima, the international fair of contemporary art in Torino. Between 2007 and 2009, you worked as curator at Barbican Art Gallery in London. And in 2007, you curated the Slovenian pavilion at the 52nd Venice Biennial with Tobias Putri. And in 2009, the New Zealand pavilion with Francis Pritchard. You curated numerous internationally acclaimed exhibitions, among others, the large-scale Martian Museum of Terrestrial Art, 2008, gathering a huge amount of artworks which could possibly tell something about human life and culture to outer space anthropologists, if I remember well.
Yeah.
And Radical Nature, held in 2009, unfolded a fantastical landscape drawing on ideas of environmental activism, experimental architecture, and utopianism. So is it right?
Absolutely, no, thank you very much for the introduction.
Then let's start. So I would say, as a short introduction, with the tablet in the hand, everyone can now browse the Tate, the Louvre, or the Getty Museum without leaving his or her couch. No need to travel, to queue in the rain, or to suffer the hassles of a crowded exhibition. This is the time of the virtual museums. In the last decades, all major museums operated the transfer of their collections on the web, offering the user visits by subject and artist, sometimes even proposing the manufacturing of personalized photo albums. When did this tendency begin in English museums or English collections?
I think in England it started as part of a very... Can you hear me well?
Yeah, I can hear you well. And you? Is it okay?
Yeah. It started as part of a very important element that is in every single mission of the museum, which is bringing the collection, so bringing the work that is actually physically and legally owned by the public to the fruition of the public. So the principle of making the archives available in the internet was really to ensure that the holding of a nation was available to everyone, and this is really what happened with Tate. I'm not really sure who started first between Tate, the V&A, and the British Museum, but the sort of broad principle and direction that instigated that movement is relating to that. And then more recently, and at Tate, this really started really being experimented with, like in the last year. We started having this idea of the album function and the idea of allowing people to construct their own mini collection or their own sort of mini exhibition on the digital platform.
Yeah, this is an interesting point, actually, that you, sorry to interrupt, but I think because you were not sure about the date, the Tate developed in 1998, the Inside project, right? Mm-hmm. And it was like beginning with the launch of the website and with the beginning of the digitalization of the collection, and then the implementation of this new program you are talking about right now, right?
And also a very important element which regards the Tate, but I think regards in general thinking what a museum does and what it presents to the public, is that just last year we added all the archival holding. So if you now search in the database of the Tate collection, you get all the works and all the archive works on the same platform with the same hierarchical status, which I think it's a very healthy and very nice way of looking at what museums do, why do we accumulate objects, what status these objects have, some are worth millions, other probably £10, but like somehow their historical and emotional and intellectual significance might not be the same as the economic significance of some of the works.
And about how many artworks are we speaking?
Oh, I'm not sure. You asked me a very difficult artworks. I can't remember how many there are in the Tate collection, but like
many thousands, right?
Yeah, no, many tens of thousands. Yeah.
And all range of media are digitalized. So is it possible, for example, because you are speaking about like a growing or increasing accessibility for everybody, for a broader audience, is it possible, for example, to see or to watch artistic films in their full-length version online?
No. At the moment, there's only a sort of database entry for the film, so you would have a still image and a description of the work. So I think, I think that is necessary in the future, and that's probably the next step that needs to be broached.
So, as you say, digitization is, of course, not to be solely understood as a constitution of a digital archive of a collection, but it's also about finding new ways to activate the collections and the virtual visit of the museum. And so you were speaking about the constitution of this index now with possibility of cross-research and topics-related research. And or is it related actually to also what I read about and what is called the Interactive Learning Hub?
Partly. I mean, the Interactive Learning Hub is a space that is at Tate Britain and is used and makes use of digital technology to enhance learning experience. But I think if we go back to what you said, the interesting element of digitizing the archives is the possibility of asking different questions to what an archive is. I mean, the archive is if you go back to Foucault, it's like it's a sort of potential accumulation of potential statements of potential discursive affirmations and reformulations. So I think that what is interesting in having everything digitally is that not only you can see, if you want to see a painting by Bonnard that is in the Tate collection, but you can actually use the archive to make the archive speak, if you see what I mean, by either combining images into the album function or by combining things in your own website after you browsed what is available in a particular archive. You can make the archive speak differently, and that ability to ask question and nearly somehow you could say like ventriloquize the archive. I think it's a very rich possibility that hasn't been explored yet.
But so what you mean is that it's not only about digitalizing or giving the possibility online to reproduce like real activities, but also like to kind of like implement new kind of activities that you can find only in the virtual realm, right?
And also the possibility of asking questions, and therefore by asking questions to get the archive to speak back somehow.
The archive to be back and the public to be interactive, or to have like also the possibility to empower himself or herself.
Definitely, I mean, also because I think that what is interesting in the digital revolution is not just the access. What I was pointing out at the beginning, the fact that, you know, if you are in I don't know, in a remote part of the world, you can actually see any work that the Tate own or the Pompidou owns within their archival database. It's not just that element that is interesting. I think what is interesting in the digital so-called revolution or the digital the impact of the digital life that we're living today has to do with the fact that it forces the museum to listen to feedback and to incorporate and to publish feedback. So, you know, if you look at what happened to the newspapers, you know, the digital had an enormous impact on the newspapers, which, you know, for some it meant closing down, for some, even recently in England, it meant not actually print the newspaper anymore, but only have a website. But the real impact is that the readers become reporters as well and commentators. So very often in prominent newspapers, the user-generated content can be of equal interest as the content generated by the professionals, by the journalists. And I think that that model and that sort of tendency and direction is something that museums need to sort of equip themselves for, so that the museum is much less a broadcasting institution. So, you know, like a sort of television, that we have the knowledge, we, like the professionals paid by the museum, have the knowledge. You come here because we give the knowledge to you, and we transmit this knowledge that we have and you don't, you, the public, not you personally. While it's much more interesting in the paradigm that I was talking about, the idea that, that it's much more porous how the knowledge is generated, that the museum is sort of providing possibilities for people to absorb, transmit, debate, question knowledge that the institution produce. And you know, we remain knowledge production institutes, but I think we need to be more cybernetic. We need to listen to feedback.
To incorporate more feedback, as you say. Yeah, but this is a very important point, actually. Like to speak about interactivity. Can I use the term interactivity in that sense? I mean, interactivity is a little bit, perhaps, I don't know, but still. It's important also, like, to ask a question like where to set the limits of this interactivity. That still, you know, it's the question I wrote you in my email about actually how to deal between these two poles, like be like eremit or be not eremit, be hermetic or being populistic, and what is the role of the audience actually in finding the way, like, to the institution of the commons. It's like, what kind of tools have you in mind right now?
We are doing a variety of experiments, and there are maybe 2 or 3 that come to mind. One that is really, it's been installed last week, so it's very recent, has to do with our collection displays. We have collection displays that are formally and conceptually organized around the idea of Constellation. Because they bring together.
Sorry, I don't hear you very much, actually. Hector, I cannot hear him. I don't know if you, but I cannot actually hear Francesco very well.
Let me hold the microphone. Is it better like this?
Sorry?
Is it better if I hold the microphone?
Yeah, it's better for me, yeah.
Okay, so I'll just hold it like this.
But there was an interruption, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. If it breaks up, tell me again, and I can start again.
Okay.
But I was talking about one particular example that has to do with our collection displays. We have collection displays that are formally and conceptually organized around the idea of constellations, because they bring together works from different time and different geographies. And rather than functioning like normally a collection display function, like, you know, you have a title and then you bring things under this title, we bring a variety of works that have some affinities, and then we try to generate not really title, but more like word clouds, like allow for idea to emerge from this group. And recently we installed this element in which you, as a visitor, can send a text message or a tweet, or I think you have to sort of compile a form online, and you can contribute to this word cloud, which is constantly moving, and you know, a word disappears if no one picks it up after 2 or 3 days. And the way that we are trying to see whether this works is that our interpretation curator goes every week into this room, takes note of all the different words, and rewrites the wall text, so that the way that a collection display is explained takes into account how members of the audience can generate ideas around it, and tries to incorporate this without necessarily, you know, it's not a Wikipedia enterprise in which we ask the audience to write the wall text.
Yeah, it's not a direct.
There's still an expert. Yeah, there's still an expert that holds certain knowledge that, you know, a general member of the audience might not have. But we are sort of letting the audience guide us to how a story is put together in a particular collection display.
So what you say is that there is always a filter, and the filter is always an expert or a professional, like intermediate, as an intermediate, actually.
I think I wouldn't call it filter, I would call it like a negotiator. It's like, I don't think that the audience should be given carte blanche. I think that the audience should be in conversation with an expert, and that should never disappear. And you know, it's the same if you go back to the metaphor or to the example of the newspapers that I said earlier. I don't wish to read a newspaper that has no journalists. But I am interested in reading, for example, in The Guardian, many comments that people make to interesting topics that are debated, because it becomes a commons, as like it becomes an agora where people can debate a particular element that can be originating from a news or from a political commentary done by somebody who is an expert, but then gets taken to other sort of direction by a collective, a community of people who are interested in that particular topic.
I'm not sure if I understood it precisely. The constellation you were talking about, it's a constellation of works featured online, or also having their place or taking an exhibition form in the physical space?
Both. We have the display here, and then online you have one of the albums that we were talking about earlier, in which you can see the 15 works in a room. And I'm not sure whether it's already online because we just installed it last week, but we should be able to have also this ability to send some feedback online from looking at which works physically are located in Liverpool, but you can still, at least conceptually and through your imagination, experience as a sort of mediated experience.
Mm-hmm. And since your implementation of such extraordinary tools, do you think actually that the physical visit can be in danger, or what is about actually the numbers of online visitors and of physical visitors?
I don't think that the visit will ever be in danger, because I think it's a different kind of experience.
Yeah, it's a bit complementary.
Yeah, I'm a believer that people will buy books all the time, even when tablets will become more prominent as a reading device. I think it's not going to disappear. And one element that I noticed that has some correlation to this digitization and therefore sort of dematerialization of the work has to do with the great, not just the prominence in terms of the artist making performances, but the public being absolutely responsive to performance art. So, you know, if you think of Marina Abramovic and MoMA, or if you think of what Tate has done in the tanks, or any other museum as a similar experience, that in the last 5 or 6 years, when you put together a performance and you have a living artist in the space, people are they can travel and they want to spend time. They want to spend their time, their money, their energy into being present. And that's the title of Marina Abramovic's intuition as well. The presentness of this is an event that I can only experience if I am there, and no one else online can experience it. So somehow there's a sort of complementarity between the fact that we can see all these paintings online, or these sculptures online, but performance becomes so key because you can't really see it. Yeah, you can see a documentation online, but the gap between the two experiences is greater. And to be honest, it's the visitors of Tate Liverpool haven't changed in the last 25 years. We have, to the general collection, we have around 600,000 visitors a year. And it's not that since there is the website features the database, it's gone down. It's I don't think it's that there is a correlation. In fact, it might just give you more desire to get involved.
And you mean 600,000 visitors for all the locations of Tate, for all the?
No, this is for Tate Liverpool.
Wow, okay.
I mean, it's the numbers here are very different than in Europe, mainly because the collection displays are free. Not only, I mean, also the kind of program that we do, but you know, museums are free in England, so you know, every single Tate. I think that the full visitors of the 4 Tates last year was 7.5 million. Mm-hmm. So
and this digitization is something that is centralized for all the venues of Tate, or do you have certain freedom at Tate Liverpool to do what you want and develop like some tools and some other not, or how is it functioning? Or is it also used as a way to connect actually the different Tate institutions?
No, it is centralized, and that is because the Tate collection is centralized, as in like it's just one collection. There's no collection for Tate Modern or for Tate Liverpool. It's done centrally, and also very often large digital projects are done centrally. So with the extension of Tate Modern, there will be a new digital application that we are working on. Which will help people find things that find their way around the 4 museums, but that's originated and developed and designed centrally, I can add and use it in different ways, but the main tool is done by the digital team, which is centralized.
And it's a web app, it's a smartphone, it's app.
It's an app, yeah.
And when will that be launched?
It will become public when the new Tate Modern opens, so it's the beginning of mid-June, the 16th of June.
2016?
Yeah.
Ah, so
yeah,
it's this year. So
it's a couple of,
okay.
Well, and 1 month, not even 2. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, perhaps we could talk about like another aspect of dematerialization, and I would like to ask you some questions about the exhibition project that you remind me of. Thank you for that. Works to Know by Heart, an Imagined Museum. In your exhibitions, I've got the impression, or this is my lecture of them, that you cross fiction and analysis, and you address, even if not very directly, the question of transmission of what is art, of what is the function of your museum, or the respect of our planet, or I don't know what's the idea of like transmission to next generation, but also transmission to the present is very important. And your recent exhibition project at Tate Liverpool, Works to Know by Heart, an Imagined Museum, took place from November 2015 until February 2016, and it's now presented at MMK, Museum für Moderne Kunst in Frankfurt am Main, until September, and will be consecutively presented at Centre Pompidou-Metz from October 2016 until March 2017. And may I read the introductory text online? Yeah. You've arrived at Tate Liverpool in the future. All of the works of art on display are about to disappear forever. Which works of art do you want to know by heart, committing them to memory so that your favorite piece lives on? The exhibition invites audiences into a fictional scenario in which the exhibited artworks will cease to exist and asks visitors to memorize the works to secure their future preservation. An Imagined Museum draws on Ray Bradbury's 1953 sci-fi novel Fahrenheit 451, a tale of a distant future in which works of literature are banned and the only way to save them is to learn them by heart. Can you tell more about this project?
Yes, this is a very large project that has been a collaboration with MMK and with the Pompidou-Metz. So it's a curatorial effort that has seen the 3 teams coming together and using the 3 collection to essentially imagine this science fictional scenario. Which, as you said, was touching upon like the idea of why do we want art in the future? So we try to articulate reasons why museums should exist. It did articulate the idea of transmission. It explored the idea of the archive and the role of the archive as a sort of collective memory, and how the collective memory can relate to the personal memory, and how this elements can become clear to members of the public that very often see museums as like institutions that just present things rather than necessarily preserve and transmit into the future and sort of ensure that they are preserved for the future. So there were all these elements, and then one very central element for us also was discussions that we had about becoming an artwork. So members of the public being able to stand in for an artwork performatively was something that we found particularly interesting as a way of again, like transmitting, a way of preserving, and a way of mimicking the function of the museum, that and the element of, museums are storages, and in these storages we accumulate vast quantities of objects.
Yes.
They are not different from memories.
But this idea of like audience or people becoming artworks was something that was actualized only at the end, well, not only, but at the end of the exhibition, right?
It was.
During this weekend, was it called the Community of the Living Museum? 2053, yes. Right? Okay. And during which, just like for the audience to know perhaps, during which all the artworks disappeared, so they were removed actually physically from the exhibition space, leaving the gallery to be replaced by members of the public who would personally recollect the missing artworks to become 2053 a living museum. So did they play the game actually? All the people?
They did. I mean, we didn't know what was going to happen. There was a massive experiment that we did, and we took the risk, thinking, maybe there's going to be 10 people, and then after half an hour, everyone disappears, and we have like an empty gallery. But it wasn't like this. First of all, we invited some people to perform, so we had some artists also involved. Some local artists, some international artists, and we probably scripted, say, 30% of the weekend, and the palimpsest of the weekend was organized so that every single work was recollected one after the other for 16 hours. So the Saturday was 8 hours, and the Sunday was 8 hours, and we went through every single work at 20 minutes. So it was like seeing an exhibition in time, but also seeing an exhibition as the memory of I think 80. More or less, there were 80 works, so 80 people.
And which artwork were remembered best?
It's difficult to say, because we had a complete eclectic variety of way of recollecting works. Like some people did a lecture, like an art historical lecture. Other people described their feelings verbally. Other people did some music. Other people did performances. Some really fantastic. Others like not of great artistic value, but definitely of great sharing value, as in like you could see a passion being shared. For example, I participated and I recollected probably the most complicated thing to remember, which is La Jetée by Chris Marker. And I essentially told the story as if it was around the campfire, like as if I was telling a story to a group of people about to go to bed. So a variety of things. It was an incredible celebration of people's passion for art. So rather than being necessarily a sort of representation or a documentation of the museum, it was really a sort of celebration of people's investment.
Yeah. This is what I wanted to say, that the dematerialization, I think it's very important in this show, and that's what I particularly like in it. It's not only the digital and machinic transfer of information, but it's a processing, or how do you say, internalization actually of a work, or by the brain, or the transit also of a work through a body or through bodies, etc. Yeah. Do you think it's important today in the era of like invasion of like digital documentation, as you said, to find ways or to emphasize on the necessity of the active looking or experiencing and remembering of art?
Absolutely.
Something that
I think because
sorry.
I think that the even just by the virtue of what a digital image is, it is a mediated representation of something, because it's translated into code, and then codes are decoded by a reader. So that mediation is even more advanced than photography per se, which essentially capture, the reflected light and colors of an object. So that puts us at a further remove from an experience. While I think what we tried to do with the Imagine Museum was we were trying to, by the use of the words, by the use of affection and the body, as you said, we were trying to instigate people's ability to formulate images in their heads of objects that are not present. So it's somehow the exact opposite to looking into a digital version of an exhibition. Because what we were trying to do was like not much, look, this is what you could have seen, but it was like finding a way for people to develop their imagination, which essentially is like the ability to conjure up images of things that are not images, feelings, thoughts around objects that are not present in front of you. So again, this element of the presence and the absence is very interesting, I think.
So, but still there were no equivalents between like the moment where the artwork were present and the moment where they were recalled. So there are two different instantiations moment, right? Because this is on one hand there is what I told you about like the thing I think the important idea that dematerialization is also the idea of like experiencing through a brain and through a body. But at the same time, I thought, yeah, okay, but still if the artworks are removed, then they are reduced also to a separate of information. And then I recalled, you know, like Sandra Dudley speaking about museum materialities and saying actually only in the physical or only according to some like physical materialities, physical like qualities, an object can unfold a specific relation actually with the viewer or with the visitor. So she was always actually, how do you say, defending an idea of like reducing the role of the subjectivity of the viewer and emphasizing about the role of the object materiality. Is it lost a little bit through such experiments or not?
I think it is lost, but I mean the experiment wasn't done as a way of advocating that the public should permanently substitute artworks. In fact, it was a paradox created precisely in order to point out how stupid it would be to do that. And somehow also is done in an economic and political climate in which, museums maybe less, but like contemporary art institutions are really under danger of disappearing. And for us, it was interesting to dramatize this sort of potential, not very far away, horrible situation in which art will be not as available as it is now to the general public, and therefore by sort of intimating this scenario, getting people to as a sort of call for action, as a way of sort of understanding and advocating why art should be in our lives and why museums are important, which is something that we professionals debate endlessly. But it's not something that is a real matter of public debate outside the profession.
And this is something that could be perhaps also like not repaired, but like perhaps like bettered with connected to the idea of like interactivity that you were mentioning before, because of course like creative media and cultural industries were always created social link, but still actually the how do you say the effect of artworks like in the tradition of cultural industries inherited from the Industrial Revolution, etc., they were actually disconnected from. Oh, I hear me in feedback again. Disconnected from actually the social realm. So they were a social link, but it was actually among experts, and it still is. But perhaps this could be bettered through also interactivity or something.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Because, yeah, and I wanted perhaps just to ask you a little question also about the exhibition. Do you think that an artwork can unfold its plastic and semantic, let's say, extension or amplitude outside the situation of an exhibition? And if yes, where? More in the brain of the viewer or more in the virtual space, or both?
Probably more in the brain, I think, because I think there is a primacy of experience and a primacy of activation that the work delivers to its audience as a sort of how do you say, like a surface, or a sort of metaphorical surface of interrogation. So what I'm trying to say is that the photograph and the documentation that we can do with filmed, so time-based photographs as well, is not always the most appropriate way to record and transmit the variety of enjoyment, which is a mix of intellectual and aesthetic pleasure. for the sake of the argument. And you know what I mean? It's like I'm trying to say that I've got a feedback, so I'm going to just take out the things for a second. What I'm trying to say is to do with the fact that when the kind of experience that an artwork can generate in somebody looking at an artwork can be best documented through a person that an image, I think, and you can only either like have somebody describing that image through what is called the ekphrasis in art criticism, or you can experience it by like positioning yourself in front of it. But you can't really get that from a photograph or from documentation, I would say.
I was also speaking about the exhibition as a space where actually you display like different, as a in the sense of like expose, like in the intermedial sense of the word, also like as a place where you actually like put also like together different items and not so that's what also that was not only an opposition between real space, documented space and brain, but also the exhibition, but because in actually in the coalescence with other artwork or the neighborhood of other artworks, what is actually also generated. In that sense, that's the question of the exhibition, because you also do always exhibitions that are fiction, so that are really emphasizing on this kind of on this link, this invisible story that you are weaving between the different artworks.
So the question is about whether the digital or the personal memory would be.
It was just at the end a comment on my own question. Sorry, and perhaps then we could go like more like back to a more like general perspective of your vision of the museum of the future. Perhaps not only about this articulation that we thematize a little bit, articulation between online and on-site, because you were speaking about that, but perhaps, what is for you the Museum of the Future, or what is at stake in the Museum of the Future?
I think what is at stake is what I was talking earlier when I was mentioning the distinction between broadcasting institution and feedback accepting institution. I think that the Museum of the Future really needs to incorporate the audience not as a consumer, but as a mix between producer and consumer, and not because necessarily we consume in museums and we spend money in museums, but like we receive and we transmit in museums as audiences. And I think in that sense, what you call the institution or the Museum of the Commons is by some sort of force an institution that design a path for everyone to be able to participate and to take advantage of this shared property. So it's an institution that is designed with the audience and that is somehow programmed with the audience, not by the audience.
Yeah, with the audience.
So it's with and not by. So I'm not talking about, giving the audience what the audience wants, but it's about being in dialogue, and it's about being creating the pedagogical condition for the audience to be asking the right questions. And here you can bring in the notion of non-knowledge being knowledge. You can bring the audience of equality, the question of equality, as a sort of pedagogical tool to progress towards the co-design of new knowledge in a particular setting. So I think that the Museum of the Future is definitely an institution of the commons. Is definitely an institution in which debate is very important. Is probably more similar to the Greek Agora than to the sort of encyclopedic museum of Hegel, and it's therefore probably incorporate the audience not just in a sort of feedback loop, but also in a different model of governance, which needs to be more distributed rather than centralized. So it's not the director and the trustees who need to decide things or that sort of design what the Museum of the Future is, but there should be a way, a little bit like in the Fan Palace by Secretary Price, there should be a way in which the audience use of the institution is incorporate as part of the change and part of the way of designing it.
Yeah, and then the institution has really like to go to the public. Is it something that you try to begin to do with the Liverpool biennial? Because I read like that the biennial will unfold. I'm very looking forward. Unfold through the landscape of the city. It's organized as a story, narrated in several episodes, fictional words cited in galleries, museums, pubs, unused spaces, stations, hotels, parking lots, shops, and supermarkets. So it's also the way to already a kind of like way to open it, also like to places where the art is not sacred first, and where perhaps people are interacting in another way.
And also because storytelling is a very compelling tool to involve audiences in worlds that normally they would find probably quite alienating. So we have designed the show as a series of episodes, but not necessarily in a feuilleton kind of way. It's not that there's one episode following the other. It's more like parallel universes. It's more like the episode of Star Trek than the episodes of House of Cards, to easy metaphors. It's an episode that works procedurally. So we have like a limited amount of artists, like more or less 40, and they participate more or less in every episode, so that you will see recurring the same amount of artists in different worlds, like the Star Trek, team goes from planet to planet and then encounters other people. So there's always a different encounter. But the idea is really to have stories that are living simultaneously in parallel universes that are generated through fiction. So here in Tate Liverpool, we will have an episode that looks at a group of artists producing an exhibition in collaboration with ancient Greek artists. So we will have actually antique sculptures from the Archaeological Museum here in Liverpool, mixed together with like a variety of commissions by contemporary living artists. In another episode, which is dedicated to children, children are conceived as like the collaborators and the primary audience of a variety of works. So they are designing a film, and it's set with an artist and the display of that film as well. And they will be the sort of primary audience for that particular episode.
Thank you very much. And perhaps the last question about actually like your role as curator in that. So when we're speaking about opening, about actually like almost crossing education goals and curatorial practice, do you see it as your own duty also to do that, or it's like more about education curator?
No, I think it's our duty. I think that the distinction between education and exhibition curators should disappear in the future. And I'm trying to work towards this, and it's very difficult because the two professions are pretty much, entrenched in the jargon and in the modus operandi. Exhibition is a cyclical event in which every 3 months you do something completely new. You forget everything you've done before. While education is actually something that is like a sort of Nietzschean return of the same sort of model that you adapt to different kind of situations. But I think that I mean in the Museum of the Future, so I answered your previous question as well. In the Museum of the Future, there are no difference between an education and exhibition curator which are not based on specific projects and specific area of interest.
Thank you very much. This is what I wanted to hear. Thank you so much. Now I would like to open to the questions of the audience. Do you have some? Or some remarks? Or do you have something you would like to add, Francesco? Sorry?
The speed of both of you.
Okay. Nikolaus commented. Did you hear him?
No.
Nikolaus said he liked the speed of our talk. I'm sorry. Francesco, do you have something you would like to add, or to say just like as a...
One thing that came to mind when you were speaking earlier, that is a nice reference, is one of the variations of a project by Raimundas, who is one of the co-curators. Raimundas Manacorda is one of the co-curators of the Liverpool Biennial. who I think is one of in your list of speakers as well, right? For this series of talks. But when you were talking about transmitting an exhibition, it just brought to mind a project that we collaborated with a few years ago, in which I asked him to do one of the hypnotic exhibitions, but instead of like asking artists to design works to be transmitted through hypnosis, we ask a variety of writers to describe exhibitions from the past. And one writer even described the unveiling of Praxiteles sculptures in the Parthenon as you know, the first exhibition that you could essentially be narrated under hypnosis, so that when you wake up, you had the impression of having experienced it directly. So it just came to mind when you were talking about is it more effective to transmit through photograph or through memory? And in that case, there was an early experiment that we were doing with Raimundas, in which essentially we were trying to plant memories in people's real unconscious and you know, like real memories in a sort of very artificial way through hypnosis. But somehow I think it really touches in a very iconoclastic and provocative way on some of the things that we discussed.
Very nice. I think it's perhaps a little bit similar than the project Cosa Mentale at Centre Georges Pompidou, not with the hypnotism, but also with this idea of like finding a way actually other or over rationality to transmit things or emotions, or I don't know. Thank you very, very much.
No, it's a pleasure.
Thanks. Have a nice evening. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.